Well, welcome everyone. It is so very good to see all your faces. This is wonderful. Thank you for coming on a Saturday to spend an hour with a sustainability expert and an accomplished chef. And you already know that we're being recorded, and that will be posted on the website as soon as we can get our act together on that. We are exploring today a plant-rich diet and how it's good for you, good for the animals, and good for the planet. It's sponsored by Interfaith Creation Care of the Triangle, otherwise known as ICCT, Orange Chatham Interfaith Care for Creation, OCICC, and Pachamama RTP. I'm Lynn Lyle from ICCT, and each one of you is invited right now or throughout the program to introduce yourself on the chat with your name and faith community and its location, and feel free to add a news bite about your faith communities or your own personal creation care activity. And anyone from the press can email ICCT. The address is in the chat, the email address, and we will get back to you to arrange any contacts for comments you would like to have or in-depth interviews. I don't know if anybody from the press is here or not. But regardless, today we're here on the border of the ancestral homelands of the Siouan, Tuscarora, and Saponi people. And that fits right in with our opening reflection, which is from a psalter of the Chinook Indian Nation at the mouth of the Columbia River in Oregon. The prayer in the psalter is entitled, appropriately enough for today's topic, "The Garden is Rich." The garden is rich with diversity, with plants of 100 families, in the space between trees with all the colors and fragrances, basil, mint, and lavender. Great mystery, keep my remembrance pure. Raspberry, apple, rose. Great mystery, fill my heart with love. Dill, anise, tansy. Holy winds blow in me. Rhododendron, zinnia. May my prayer be beautiful. May my remembrance, O great mystery, be as incense to thee in the sacred grove of eternity, as I smell and remember the ancient forests of earth. So, moving on to recognize the people responsible for planning today's program, a big thank you to Emily Barrett, one of our speakers today, and to Elise Strevel from the Kadampa Buddhist Center in Raleigh. We really appreciate your work on it. I see a lot of you out there who were at the ICCT Human Prayer Chain for Climate Justice last month. Thank you for being there. There were more than 200 people and clergy in the chain, and many said it was a joyful and inspiring experience. If you have time at the close of our program today, you're invited to stay on and watch a short, uplifting video with footage of the entire length of the prayer chain and clergy comments, together with photos of people and their signs. You might see yourself there. Here's a well-deserved shout out to the prayer chain planning team of 8, the gang of 8, right? From Pullen Baptist, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh, and Community United Church of Christ. Thank you, Karen Delahunty, Russ Outcalt, Gary Smith, Grace Evans, Dan Figgins, Ann Eller, and Jim McMahon. Congratulations too to Orange Chatham Interfaith Creation Care for a similar event that week in downtown Chapel Hill. Charles Coble reports it was a glorious day with ringing of church bells and a good turnout. In these prayer chains for climate justice last month, we as people of faith came together and called for bold, systemic change. Today, we're exploring a powerful way to achieve change at the individual and faith community levels. My challenge to you is this: as you hear the words of our wonderful speakers today, think creatively about your own faith community and your own life. Can you imagine ways to weave some of these ideas and resources together to benefit your own health, the animals, and the planet? ICCT and Pachamama have resources that may be useful to your faith community. Email us at icctriangle@gmail.com. That's in the chat. And we'll get right back to you to see what we can do to support you. Now let's turn it over to Emily Barrett, our first speaker. She's a natural resources and resilience professional, a Pachamama RTP volunteer, a member of Kirk of Kildare Presbyterian Church, a Girl Scout leader, and a mother. She will first tell you about herself and Pachamama, then speak about the effects of a plant-based diet, and finally introduce our other main speaker, Dilip Barman. Dilip, I've been anticipating your appearance with great relish since I first saw one of your YouTube videos. It was wonderful. And a special thanks to Emily and Dilip for their wonderful list of resources included in last night's newsletter. So we'll send it to everyone who pre-registered for this event. And if you don't get it for one reason, you're not on the list or whatever, email ICCT in the chat and we'll send it to you. So Emily, a warm welcome to you and thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you to the Interfaith Creation Care of the Triangle, Orange Chatham, Interfaith Creation Care for Creation, excuse me. Let me share some slides. We are so excited to have everyone together today, and I'll be talking with you a little bit about Pachamama RTP and why we care so much about sharing ways to have a plant-rich diet. Change takes support, and we are so grateful for our partnerships. We think that's what it's all about. So what is Pachamama RTP? Well, we are going through a transformation. So as I talk with you about why we're interested in plant-rich diets, I'll also talk to you about why Hetty Hollyfield, Tom Fletcher, and early on Linda Watson and Kathy, who's on the line, have been thinking about what will Pachamama RTP evolve into. With Linda Watson and Hetty Hollyfield's help, we started out as focused on drawdown. For those of you who may not know what drawdown is a compendium, a book of the top 50 ways we can reverse climate change today with solutions that we know about today. Now, number 3 is reducing food waste. And number 4 is a plant-rich diet. So if you think about, out of 80 solutions, these 2 related to food are in the top 5. So they are very important. And they are not about being perfect. They're not about having to be absolutist. They're just about incorporating more plants into your diet and doing what you can do. So look at this slide, and I think this is a great visualization. It's the top 20 high-impact climate actions for households and individuals. So one thing to be clear on is systemic change is important. We must change at the system level, but we can also change at the household level, and food is tops. You see here, 12.4% of a vision toward a climate, an environment that only warms to 1.5%. 12.4% have to do with reducing food waste and plant-rich diets. And so look at these pounds here. This is gigatons of CO2. you can see that plant-rich diet is huge. As we've been looking at who we are as Pachamama RTP, we focused around drawdown and these simple solutions and this incredibly positive message that we don't have to wait for technology, that we have those solutions today. Well, Pachamama Alliance has decided that they are pivoting to support a new book by Paul Hawken called Regeneration. And regeneration focuses on solving the climate crisis in one generation. And a bit of a difference in regeneration is that they focus on people and connections and how we can create change together. And we at Pachamama RTP think that's a spectacular message. They focus around nexus actions like eating plants, and they have a support system including punch lists that you can share with your friends. On the website, you can see I created an individual punch list to eat more plants. And I'd be interested in this as a tool. You can go in and create punch lists for your organization, your workplace, your women's group, your congregation, and you can share it socially. The website is structured in this way, and I thought it was a really nice sort of snapshot of looking at levers for action. There can be individual action, group action, company action, but don't forget that governance is huge, as well as knowing who the actors are, the key players and the bad actors, and having resources to learn. And you'll notice that in the resource list that we sent out, it is structured around watch, read, and listen, and much of it came from the Regeneration website. So in my own life, when I've tried to incorporate more plants into my diet, I've hosted at my workplace a Meatless Monday where everyone brings in a meatless dish. I've subscribed to community supported agriculture or CSAs through Copeland Springs Farm in Pittsburgh and Good Hope Farm in Cary. But you can see individual actions include many actions, but just two are eat more diverse foods that I think Dilip will help us consider, and to reduce meat consumption significantly. So Pachamama has drafted a draft purpose statement, and that is Pachamama RTP connects people to the urgency of climate change through collective action and community building. We seek to create a socially just, environmentally sustainable, and spiritually fulfilling world through the regeneration of the natural and social systems that support us all. So that's a little snapshot of our group and why we think eating plants is so important. And it's not just us that thinks that. You know, Drawdown has profiled it numerically as one of the top things you can do, and Regeneration has reemphasized it as well. So I encourage you to check those out. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Dilip Barman. Dilip, I feel like, is our local plant-based eating celebrity, and he's local to us, but he's internationally known. He's been involved with a plant-based lifestyle for decades. He's the president of the Triangle Vegetarian Society here in North Carolina, where he hosts the country's largest vegetarian, all vegan Thanksgiving. He's a Food for Life instructor, and he is the producer of a new film called Code Blue that was released during the pandemic in May, showing how lifestyle choices can profoundly affect health. He's on numerous advisory boards, and he helped to found a monthly internet show called So Many Cooks in the Kitchen. So Dilip is very involved, not only in video media, but he also writes on plant-based eating and has his own blog and tweets about food-based eating too. So Dilip is all over the media talking about plant-based eating, and we are so happy to have him here. And I will turn it over to Dilip and spotlight him in the Zoom and just thank you all for being here.
Well, Emily, thanks for what a wonderful introduction. I hope that my presentation lives up to your wonderful words. I wanted to acknowledge you, Emily. It's been wonderful working with you over the past month or so as you set this meeting up. I wanted to thank Lynn as well. Thank you for having me. And it's very nice to see Elise in the audience. I've known Elise for many years, and I suspect Elise had something to do with the introduction. And I thank you very much, Elise, for bringing my name forward as possibly somebody who could share a bit. So Emily mentioned a lot of things. I think I'll kick off with urging everybody to check out our Thanksgiving. We surpassed Chicago about 15 years ago as having the largest vegetarian Thanksgiving, all vegan. I use vegetarian interchangeably with vegan. For me, vegetarian means plant-based. And as a Food for Life instructor, and I'll talk about that, usually mean it as whole food plant-based. And I'll talk about all of these terms. But Thanksgiving is glorious. And I don't think it'll happen this year because of the pandemic, but typically we have people who fly in. There's usually a couple families from Illinois, upstate New York, Florida, Philadelphia. There's one family. We started getting families from Canada, and there's often a family or two from California, and they come because our event is glorious, if I do say so myself. And I know some of you have been to it. Elise, you've been to it, I know. And I think, Emily, you said you've been to it as well. So sustainability and social justice is super important to me. One thing we do is we sell tickets at a loss. We give the restaurant what they ask, but we charge less. And we also offer it if anybody has employment issues or they're a student and can't afford it, name your price, call us, contact us and let us know that we'd like to come. We lost our job, and so we can't afford it this year. We'll often say, just come and we'll pay for you. So we used to sell out in less than 2 minutes. And so now for some years now, we do a lottery, and the lottery has opened at 11 a.m. today. There's no rush. People used to stop what they were doing. They would stop their tennis lessons. They would stop a class they were taking. They'd be there right at the time we opened. And we didn't want to do that. We were concerned about older people who maybe are a little slower with the internet and reading their credit card and all. So now we're open basically for 2 or 3 days, and then we draw a random number, and then we start filling our seats from there. This year we're doing a Thanksgiving in person. We're requiring proof of vaccine, and then we're doing a pre-Thanksgiving all outdoors with no proof of vaccine required. So check it out. I'm sure Emily will share the link. So why am I here today? I often give talks on veganism, and today is a little different because I'm in the kitchen. I'm actually, right after this, recording a presentation about rice, and I'll spend a little bit of time talking about rice. Rice has a profound environmental impact in its growth and use, and I'll share some information that might surprise you about rice. And I'm doing double duty because, as I mentioned, right after this, I'm going to be recording again. And I also wanted to acknowledge Brian Olson behind the camera. He's well known in the plant-based world himself and was involved in films such as Forks Over Knives, which I recommend. And so thanks to Brian for filming me now and for continuing on with my rice demonstration. So down the road, if you guys are interested, I'd love to give a PowerPoint. I have a very detailed PowerPoint presentation, and I cover the health, ethical, environmental benefits of plant-based eating. But you know what I think is the biggest benefit of plant-based eating is taste. It tastes so good. And there's so much variety. Emily and Lynn, am I allowed to brag a little bit?
Go for it.
So I'll brag a little bit. I've known my wife for about, 16, 17 years. And I do almost all the cooking at home. I also teach math, and so I teach on Thursday and Sundays, and I don't cook those days. But generally, I cook at home, and I've never repeated dinner for my wife. And I brag not to show myself off, but to show off how easy it is to be plant-based. I've created a plant-based, generally whole food plant-based dish with no added fat, no oil, and that's the last 6 years. But a vegan dish every single day, almost every 17 years or so, 16 or 17 years. And if I can do that, you can do it. So it's very easy being plant-based. What I and please interrupt me at any time, is I'm going to spend a little bit of time. I don't like going to talks where it's all theory. I want to also give practical applications. I mentioned I teach math, for example, and I teach second grade up through algebra. I tutor high school. I've taught college math. And even when we talk about pure math, I'm always looking for those applications. So what can you do with this? And so today I'll be sharing some food ideas. I'm in the kitchen. I'm at the Turkish Community Center, the new Sandra Community Center, where I do a lot of my cooking and a lot of classes. So I'll talk a little bit of theory, and then I'll talk about some things you can do in your kitchen. So I don't know if you guys know this. I assume most of the people, perhaps everybody on the call, is from the area. So we are, of course, in the South. A Southern diet is not considered one of the healthiest diets. It's actually considered the least healthy diets in the United States. And eating a Southern diet, typical Southern diet, increases the risk of heart disease by 56%. 56%. It increases the chances of stroke by 30%. And I want to take a moment and talk about stroke and heart disease. You may be able to tell that my ethnicity, my parents are from India. And you might say, well, so I've heard about plant-based, maybe I should move towards Indian vegetarian cooking. And there's many good Indian dishes. In fact, I was in this very kitchen cooking Indian dishes last night. And the Indian diet is a good one, but it turns out that in India, people following a standard Indian diet, they have high rates of heart disease and stroke. Why is that? Because many of them are vegetarian. And the reason is they may be vegetarian, but they're still particularly high levels of dairy products. And dairy products from a health point of view are as bad, or one could argue worse, than animals. If you think about it from an perspective, we didn't evolve to drink cow's milk. We did evolve to drink milk when we were babies, but even that we would give up at age 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, something like that. So dairy, I could spend 20 minutes talking about dairy, but our talk is about the environment, so I'm going to move on. With veganism, fully plant-based diet, you get 0 cholesterol. I don't know if you know this, but many of you guys may have heard of Dean Ornish. Dean Ornish is very well published, and it's got to be 20 years now. He published the Ornish diet, and he showed, I think it's with an 82% efficacy rate. There's very few things in medicine that are that successful of not just stopping heart disease, but reversing it. Many of us will get heart disease and we'll see a doctor, and then we may have to have some interventional surgery. With the Ornish plan, and I think you'll be very pleased to hear at least one of the aspects of the Ornish plan, with an 82% chance, your heart disease can be reversed. And the 3 aspects are low-fat plant-based eating, and then doctor-directed moderate exercise. And the third thing, won't surprise this audience, is prayer, if you're religious. And I know this is a faith community, so prayer makes a difference, and there's a lot of literature that shows prayer does make a difference. Now, if you're not religious, then meditation centering can also fit the those 3 things: low-fat plant-based eating, moderate exercise, and prayer. And don't pray if you're not religious, just out of the blue. Oh, I have heart disease, so I'm going to pray. That's not it. If you come from a religious tradition and you've imbibed it, then it can make a difference. And if you haven't, then meditation centering can. Is anybody surprised by that? So it may surprise some of you. Elise is saying it may surprise some people. Veganism has no cholesterol. It drastically cuts down on your type 2 diabetes risk, heart disease risk, blood pressure, gut health, BMI, body mass index, risk of cancer, hormone balance, and brain health. And there's a lot of very strong scientific evidence backing all of this up. And if you would like me to at some point, I'd love to dive deep into the weeds and share some of the wonderful research with you. Did you know that saturated fat has a higher mortality correlation than smoking? And so as a Food for Life instructor, Food for Life is a nutrition education program of the Physicians Committee. It's a group based out of Washington, D.C. And we teach people about the benefits of whole food, plant-based eating. Whole food, plant-based eating means eating food similar to the way it was grown, like these lentils, right? Or these grains. This is closed, but there's some barley, peas, and lentils. Maybe some rice, maybe some mango, maybe some beautiful squash. And I'll talk about squash soon. But eating these foods, not just fairly how they look, but without adding oil. And there's a lot of misnomers about olive oil in particular as being a healthy choice. And again, I could take 10, 15 minutes, but I won't because I know we want to talk about the environment. And I'd love to have a session with you talking about those kinds of issues. And in terms of, so there's a lot of evidence in terms of the health, in terms of ethics, and I know I can feel comfortable speaking of ethics in this audience. There's a book I might recommend, and Emily, I forgot to send this to you as a reference, but my friend Rinberry has a wonderful book called Food for the Gods. Food for the Gods. And this, I think, is an important book for the faith community, because what he does in this book is he addresses many of the world's major religions. As I recall, he talks about Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, did I say Judaism? And there's more, Islam. And he feels that the foundation of these religions, for example, he makes arguments that Jesus was a vegan. And he talks about, when you talk about fish and loaves of bread and things like that, the ancient Aramaic word for food was translated as fish, was not meant that way. And so anyhow, the book has chapters in each of these religions. He talks about how the intent of the originator was a compassionate, low impact diet. And in the second part of each chapter, he talks about how a modern opponent of that religion encourages that in their congregation. Here in North Carolina, we have a Christian group, for example, near the coast called Hallelujah. Sometimes come to our Thanksgiving, and this is one thing that they promote. There are Jewish groups who do the same thing. There's Hindu and Buddhist groups as well. So that's something that might be of interest to this audience, food for the gods. And then let's go down into, and a couple more about health is going plant-based. There's a lot of evidence, comes from the faith community too, by the way. This comes from the Seventh-day Adventists. About half of all Adventists are vegetarian. They take the Garden of Eden diet very seriously. And so there's a lot of great evidence there. There's large numbers of people. And so a lot of work has been done in longevity, and it's been shown that vegetarians live, I think it's 7 years longer on average, and vegans live 8 years longer. And it's not just living longer, it's also living healthier, not having as many debilitating diseases. We all live our fullest lives, and then when it comes time to do it gracefully and with minimal pain. And so there's a lot of evidence about that. Veganism, vegans have much less rates of bone disease and fracture, and a lot of that work was done by Colin Campbell. Colin is a friend of mine. He lives part of the year here in Durham. He's a retired professor of Cornell University. If you haven't seen Forks Over Knives, that's a film that he and Caldwell Esselstyn, a heart surgeon, are featured in. I strongly recommend that. And it turns out by cutting out the milk, it's actually good for your bones. And I could spend 10 minutes talking about why, but I won't. And finally, before I move on to the environment, here's a few references I would recommend you look at in terms of health. Forks Over Knives, my film Code Blue, and if your group is interested, I'd be glad to do and do a Q&A. We do these around the world. Code Blue is, I think, an impactful film about the benefits of plant-based eating. Neil Barnard, who started Physicians Committee, is a wealth of information. He's been publishing about health and ethical and environmental impacts of plant-based eating. Colin Campbell, and of course, Nelson does a lot of wonderful jumpstart programs. He's made a film. Anything by Brenda Davis. She's my favorite nutrition one, and I see a lot of links are coming on your screen. Brenda is a charming person. I believe one of my recipes is in her forthcoming books. Food for Life classes. I'd love to do some Food for Life classes for your organization. Food for Life, I did a class last night. They're usually a series of 5 to 7 weeks. We talk about nutrition. We get a quiz about nutrition. We cook. I cook and usually 3 dishes to try. And then nutritionfacts.org. Michael Greger is a powerhouse of information on evidence-based nutrition. Nutritionfacts.org, I recommend you look at. Let's jump into environment. That's why you guys are here. So I homeschool. My daughter is a 7th grader. And I used to give presentations and say, did you know that eating low on the food chain saves a dramatic amount of energy? Every step of the way from plants and up, you lose 90% of the energy. And last year in 6th grade, because I was a 6th grade teacher with my daughter, I had her, and if I do a presentation for you, I'll share her graphic. She made a great graphic. And this is what happens. The sun shines down on us, Now, ideally, if we were green and could sprout leaves, we would photosynthesize and we wouldn't have to eat. Of course, I enjoy eating. I like the pleasure of it, but we wouldn't have to if we could generate our own starches and carbohydrates, proteins, fats. And so we can't. So we must eat plants. Now, when we eat the plant, we're getting 10% of the sun's energy that went into the plant. And that 10% looks like the lights went out. And I think it's because we're not moving or something. Maybe you have to do a dance or something. So
that's the house.
The house lights went out. So we'll try to figure out why the lights went out. Am I still visible? I'm sorry about that.
You look actually good. You're in that bright color. Your lighting is fine.
Okay, we'll see if the overhead lights can come back on. I don't know why that happened, but so when we eat a plant, we're only getting 10% of the energy that rained down on the plant. When we eat a rabbit who's eaten the plant, we only get 10% of the energy of that rabbit. So we're getting 10% of 10%, which is getting very, very small, right? 10% of 10% is 1%. 1/10 of 10% is 1%. And then when the wolf eats the rabbit that ate the plant, they're getting 10% of 1%, 0.1%. Why is that? If you think about animals, a lot of the energy is used, like if you were to eat a rabbit, you're not getting 100%, you're getting 10%, because a lot of the energy is used for the rabbits hopping around, for the rabbits reproducing, for the rabbits, some of the food is wasted, goes through their digestive system, for their own growth. So in many places, the energy is lost, and we're not eating 100% of the rabbit. I'm not, but people who eat rabbits or creatures who eat rabbits. So at every stage of the food pyramid, we're losing a significant amount of energy. This is the fundamental reason why eating low on the food chain is dramatically important. And it's by far the best thing we can do for the environment. And to be honest, I'm so glad you guys are here. I'm so glad, because I've been feeling very pessimistic about things, about the environment. And I'm glad that, at the climate summit we just had in Scotland, they had mostly vegan food. I wish it was all vegan food, but they had a lot of vegan food, and they're recognizing this. But this is the elephant in the room. There's so much evidence that the biggest impact we make is by eating low on the food chain. You guys do, but almost nobody talks about this. Al Gore, when he made his film An Inconvenient Truth, he listed 100 things you could do: take less showers, drive less. And I don't think he even mentioned eating vegan. Or if he did, it was one of the last things. And I'm going to do some hand waving. This is the impact we make eating vegan. This is the impact we make by driving a smaller car or by taking shorter showers. Should we drive a smaller car and take shorter showers? Sure, we make tiny impacts. But should we do this? I think so. And I think if we move towards this kind of a model, we might be able to solve the climate change issue, and we might have a much longer time on Earth. And I think the time is critical to do it, not now, but 30 years ago. So now we should do the best we can. And there's a lot of people who are speaking in this space. My favorite in this space is Sailesh Rao. He has a group called Climate Healers. And for me, in Food for Life, everything we share, and this Rao. Sailesh was an engineer with Intel. He was involved with the building of the internet. And he became very concerned. He had grandchildren. He became very concerned with the environment. And by the way, I can talk on and on. I'm going to stop after 40 minutes or so, but please interrupt me. I could keep you here for 3 hours. Brian's going to be unhappy. You'll be unhappy. I won't do that. But please interrupt anytime you want. So Sailesh was very concerned about the environment. And he said, I have this granddaughter. I have to look into me as an engineer. Sailesh was saying this. I know a lot. Let me research this. And if you go to Climate Healers, look at his charts. They're extremely detailed charts about the impact when we make choices to eat dead fish, dead animals, dairy products, what impact we're making. I have a few statistics here. They're called lifestyle assessments. If everybody in the United States skipped meat and cheese once a week, that's Meatless Mondays, right? That's the same as not driving 91 billion with a B miles, not driving 91 billion miles, or getting rid of 76 million cars, just totally getting rid of them. And that's just one day a week. But why stop there? There's an awesome person. Her name is Eleni Vlachos. She used to live here. She's now in Philadelphia. She's such a wonderful person. She's very approachable, kind, she's non-judgmental, and she shares all the time the benefits of plant-based eating. So in the Atlantic, she has an article, and I don't know if anybody's seen it. It's an amazing article. It's called, well, before I tell you what it's called, she's of Greek origin. She was really bereft. She was very sad. There were tons of fires in Greece, global warming. She was very, very sad. She said, we've got to do something about this. And she was involved in establishing Meatless Mondays in the Triangle here, this part of North Carolina, when she lived here. So she said, you know, things are drastic. We need to do something. We need severe action. And so she said, Meatless Mondays is a thing of the past. And so she wrote an article for The Atlantic called Meat Mondays. And she said, eat anything you want on Monday, go to town, eat dead animals, eat dairy. I mean, she's being facetious. She's not encouraging us to eat these things, but eat these things. But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, be vegan. And then maybe we have a chance of healing our planet and restoring it to the way it was intended. I know this is a faith audience, so I can refer to things like this. If you look at Native populations like the Native Americans, they have a tremendous history of plant-based eating. Did they eat animals? They ate some animals, but the way they ate animals was very sustainable, where they would kill a few animals and use all, you know, as much of the animals they could. We don't need to eat animals today. There's no good reason to. If you're living in the northern part of Alaska and you can't grow plants, then you have no choice. Some people, I mean, we have grocery stores, but some may feel they want to live out in the, you know, in the wilderness, and maybe there are some situations, but where I live, there's plenty of plant-based foods available. So there's really no reason I find ever, I don't find it appealing. Why would I ever eat a bit of animal food when there's tremendous evidence that it's bad for me and that it's also expensive? It tastes wonderful not eating animal foods, and it's sustainable. So I choose not to eat any. I'm a vegan, and I'm primarily based. The UN has published many reports. The UN FAO, and many of you are familiar with Michael Pollan. Michael Pollan has written, eat food, eat real food, mostly plants, right? And if you press him on it, he will tell you that plant-based eating is really the way to go. So he's another great person. The Blue Zones talk about this as well. But a film that also talks about this is Cowspiracy. Cowspiracy is an interesting film. I don't know if anybody has seen that. So Cowspiracy talks about the environmental impact of plant-based eating. There's a new book called Food is Climate by Glenn Mercer, and my friends are in that book. So there's some good references. So getting back to the United Nations, the FAO, which stands for Food and Agricultural Organization, I believe, number of reports that has said, quote, that animal-based agriculture, meaning eggs, dairy, and meat, is one of the top 2 or 3 most significant contributors to the most serious environmental problems at every scale, from local to global, okay, at every scale. And meat and milk production generates more greenhouse gas emissions than transportation. So when people talk about driving less, yeah, that sounds good, but start with what you eat, right? So start with what you eat. It begins with the fork. And for a moment, diving back into ethics, because of this audience, what we eat begins with the fork. Nonviolence begins with the fork. I teach a class, Elise, I don't know if you took my Gandhi and nonviolence class. I think you did, years, maybe not. So I also teach a class through Duke Ollie. I haven't taught it for some years, on Gandhi and nonviolence. And we talk about Gandhi's view about food. I'm going to cite some statistics here. I'm going to make sure I'm right. About 70% in this country of grain that we grow, for us, it's for animal agriculture, 70% and 33% worldwide. About 2/3 of all available agricultural land is used by livestock. It takes 10 to 30 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of beef, and we only use about 35 to 40% of that for beef for people. When we want beef, I think you guys know this, it results in rainforest biodiversity loss. We don't have enough space. We ask our Brazilian friends, for example, hey, Brazilian friends, could you please cut down some rainforest trees because we want cows to graze. Let's bring this species that doesn't normally exist there, and let's let them roam. They need lots of space. They're cutting down these trees, and who knows what we're losing there. There's a lot of potential medicine there. There's animals. And I see I'm blocking a bit. Is there a problem on the transmission? Can you guys see me okay? I'm getting some
We,
blotchiness.
we can see you. Occasionally, you'll get a little rectangle at the bottom of the screen, but it pops away rather quickly.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what's causing that, but we'll move on. It takes 200 times as much water to grow beef versus a potato, for example. Okay, so this is going back to take shorter showers. Yeah, but what are you eating? If you're a vegan, yeah, you're doing this much, do a little bit more, take shorter showers, right? But you're doing this much already. If you're not doing this much, that's not why bother, but why focus on this? Focus on that, right? 200 times as much water to grow beef versus potato. Half of all the water in this country is used by the meat industry, and we often have droughts in California, for example, but maybe don't water your gardens. That's exactly what you should be doing. You should be watering your gardens and enjoying fresh grown produce. Why don't we take that water away from growing meat? It takes 990 liters of water to make 1 liter of milk. 60%, and this is an old statistic, I think the number's got to be higher now. 60% of rivers or streams in the US are impaired, and the primary source of impairment is agricultural runoff. Okay, so those are some statistics, but enough with statistics. I think basically it makes sense that eating low in the food chain is a good thing. It's easy to be plant-based. It's easy to be 100% plant-based. If you're not ready to be 100% plant-based, moving towards it is a good thing. If you give up meat on Monday and dairy, that's great. And I do recommend, as you look at the journey, whether it's from health, environment, or ethics, and I'll spend a moment talking about ethics for this audience, start with a dairy. Dairy is addicting, and I could spend 15 minutes talking about casomorphins and dive into that. I won't, but I would give up dairy before I'd give up meat. There is, in the last ice age, there wasn't enough greenery to go around. And so we evolved. If you look at our gut, our teeth, our digestive system, we look a lot more like rabbits or deer than tigers. And so there wasn't enough greenery. So we evolved not to consume milk, but if we have to be omnivorous. If we have to, we can eat deer meat. If we have to, we can eat cow meat. We'll survive. It brings with it problems with our vasculature. It can impair our brain function. It can increase chances of cancer, but at least we survive. And if you have a choice of not having enough food or killing a deer, then I can see why somebody would do that. But we never evolved to have milk. Milk has caused a lot more problems than meat. So I would start with the meat, with the dairy. And people generally find meat easy to give up. There's so many analogs, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But why ethics? You might say that I care for animals, and so I'm happy to take their milk. It causes no harm. Well, if you think about it, it's possible, I guess, in the small scale that you could coexist with one cow and maybe share some of the milk, but that's not how it's done. The vast, and in this country, it's got to be 999% of dairy. If you think about it, the only way the cow is going to give milk is if the cow is pregnant and has a baby. We are jealous of sharing that milk. So what we do is we artificially impregnate cows. They're called rape racks, and they're artificially impregnated. And Emily, I hope I'm not getting too explicit. Stop me if I am. So the cows are impregnated, and then when the baby is born, the baby is taken away. The calves are put into veal crates. They're not allowed to move much, so their meat is nice and tender, and they live a few weeks, and they're given not their mom's milk, they're given artificial things, and to keep their flesh white, we take their milk. The cows cry at length. They miss their babies. They cry. I know people who live in these areas, and they say for months on end, they can hear those poor mom cows crying. I have a daughter, and I am a stay-at-home dad, and I helped raise her, and I know what it's like, that bond. She would breastfeed, and I would also use breast milk in bottle and feed her. And I can't imagine having a baby taken away from a sentient creature. The mom's key desires to keep the baby alive. And so then the cow is made pregnant again and again and again. And eventually the body wears out and the cow collapses, and they try to time it so that they can sell the cow as meat before that happens, because they can't sell a collapsed cow. And at that point, they grind up the cow and it becomes pet food. I don't want to have anything to do with that industry, anything whatsoever. I do not want one drop of dairy. I will never eat animal products, but if I had to, I can't imagine doing it. If I had to, I would eat the rabbit over drinking milk. There's less ethical issue for me eating a rabbit although I can't imagine eating a rabbit, but I would not drink dairy. And you don't have to. Let's start transitioning from all this talk to food. Does that sound good?
Yeah, Dilip, I'm like really eager to know your opinion on Instapots and if you use them or you don't think they're necessary or what.
I love Instant Pots, and I'm coming to that. So I'll be there in just a moment. But we're talking about milk. There's so many kinds of milk available. So here I bought some from, actually I have an assistant who helps me with prep. She bought this. So she got this, this oat milk. So this is available. You can make your own oat milk. Here's some milk made from macadamia nuts. This is unsweetened vanilla. I like unsweetened milks. And then I make my own soy milk. I get soybeans and filtered water. I bought a $85 machine, and I spent $25, I think, to get enough beans for like a year of milk. So $125, enough soy milk for a year, no packaging in that case, and then second year, no additional cost for the machine. But you can also get unsweetened, high quality soy milks. You might say, I'm used to cow's milk and all this sounds kind of good, but I don't want to give up my milk. And I tried this soy milk and it was chalky. I didn't like it. No problem. There's about a dozen different kinds of soy milk. Try a different kind. Don't like soy milk? Try oat milk. Don't like it? Try macadamia milk. Don't like it? Try hemp milk. Try rice milk. There's so many kinds. Hazelnut milk. Make your own. Almond milk. It's so easy and cheap. No packaging to make your own almond milk. The Instant Pot, I don't have my Instant Pot here, but I use it daily. The Instant Pot is awesome. It's a very easy way. You throw a few things in, press a button, and Emily, I will share with you, and you can share with everybody if you'd like. I have a document which summarizes different things you can do in the Instant Pot. One thing I like to do with the Instant Pot is, this is fall, so I have some wonderful squash here. And let's talk about squash. I have a show that I helped start called So Many Cooks in the Kitchen. Our next show is next weekend. We're doing Thanksgiving dishes, and I strongly encourage you and invite you to come to the show. It's at 2 p.m. on Saturday, somanycooks.com. You can watch it on YouTube or Facebook. So you might say, I've heard squash is good for you, and the house lights aren't on, so you may not see it so clearly. But this is acorn squash. This is carnival squash. And I love this red curry squash. And you might say, I've had it at restaurants. I love the taste of squash. And I learned to make it. You take a knife and you cut the squash and you bake it in an oven, 375 for 45 minutes. Look, I don't want to do that because it's so hard to cut. And I risk cutting myself because it's so hard. And I feel you. I feel your pain. It is hard to cut. So Emily asked about an Instant Pot. You want to know how easy it is to have squash? So on Sundays, I teach second grade virtually. And what I do just before I teach second grade is I get my Instant Pot out. I put a little trivet, which puts the food above the bottom, quarter a cup of water, and I put my red curry squash or my acorn squash or any squash in it. And I say, Instant Pot, please pressure steam for something small like this, 8 minutes, something bigger like this, maybe 12 minutes. If you have a really big squash or pumpkin, maybe as much as 16 or 18 minutes. And you'll know over time what textures you like. And that's it. When this comes out of the Instant Pot, this is no longer hard. A butter knife, vegan butter knife, a butter knife will go right through it. Even a fork will go right through it. You open it up, remove the seeds. You can roast the seeds if you want, compost them if you're not roasting them, and you're done. That's it. And now you can enjoy wonderful squash. And so right after teaching second grade, the second graders are lovely. I love teaching second grade, but they take a lot of energy from me. It's wonderful. And I like my squash right after teaching second grade. So that's one thing I use my Instant Pot for. Pot for cooking lentils and beans. It's so easy. One thing I recommend, some cans of bean at home, so that if you're in a cook, you have these. But you know, all you have to do, and you save money, you buy dried beans, soak them overnight, put them in your Instant Pot, and cook them for 9 minutes, and they'll be done. You forget to soak overnight, you put it in your Instant Pot, put plenty of water, pressure cook it for 0 minutes. That means come up to pressure, turn off, get rid of the water, and now cook it for 9 minutes. Or just forget about soaking. I do soak it. Some people don't. Just cook it. If you don't soak it, you're going to need to cook them for 20, 25 minutes. But this is good to have on hand. Let's talk about rice. So I have some rice here on hand. And I wanted to spend a few moments talking about rice because that's what I'll be demonstrating after this meeting. And since you're interested in environment, I wanted to talk about what we're doing to the environment. I bet if I asked for a show of hands, is rice good for you? Most of you would say yes. If I asked what's better, white or brown rice, you would say brown rice. My theory is brown rice is a whole grain, it has the germ and bran and everything, it's intact. Why do we eat white rice? This is my theory. In primitive cultures or in ancient cultures or in cultures where they don't have refrigeration, brown rice grows rancid. We are privileged to have refrigeration, right? And so it doesn't go rancid. But what I think happens in a lot of cultures traditionally is they have a rice celebration when they harvest rice, and they probably enjoy the wonderful taste of brown rice. But then they know that if they stick with the brown rice, it's going to go bad. So they polish it and get rid of the outer portion, and the white rice will last forever. You don't have to put it in the refrigerator. It'll last forever. I mean, I don't know if it really will last forever, but years, year or two, no problem. And so you have the brown rice is much more nutritive. But we have been using non-organic farming practices for a long time, in particular in the South with cotton. We've been using, there's diseases that cotton has, so we've been using insecticides. And those insecticides have arsenic. And the arsenic has gotten into rice, absorbs arsenic. And so this became, I don't know if anybody had heard this, but starting about 2 years ago, the alarm was raised. Be careful about rice because it has high rates of arsenic, and it does. What the take-home message for me is, the people that I like to follow, like, this is how we make rice. First of all, brown rice does have higher rates of arsenic than white rice. Is it worth it? If you prepare rice in this way. Most of you probably know the best way to prepare rice, brown rice, is you rinse it a few times, and then you cover it with, you put 1 part rice, 1.5 parts water. If you want to put a vegan bouillon cube in, you put a little bit of salt for boiling point elevation. The water's hotter and cooks better. You bring it to a boil, and then you cover it and let it simmer for 45 to 50 minutes. Turn the heat off, don't open the top, and then you fluff it. That's the traditional way to make rice. That's not the way to make rice anymore. That's not the way to make rice anymore because of arsenic. This is what the recommendations are. And it's tough. I don't know if anybody here is of Oriental Japanese origin, but rice is super important in the Far East. But the recommendation is don't eat rice every day. And especially if you have friends who are Chinese or Japanese, don't eat rice every day. There's so many other grains, and I picked this one up just to share with you. This is from a local store, Whole Foods, barley, peas, and lentils. They have many varieties of ready-to-go grains, and they'll tell you, like, put this in a pot, 2 parts water, 2.5 parts water, bring it to a boil, cover it, turn off the heat, 12 minutes later, you're done. Try to learn other grains. Quinoa, which is actually a seed, but treated as a grain. Try to use other grains. Don't use rice every day, really. So when you do want to use rice, what you do, the new way of cooking rice is you fill your pot with water, you rinse the rice, and you soak it for 48 hours. Now, I don't always remember. Sometimes for me it's overnight. Sometimes for me it's a few hours. You soak the rice for, farro is a great choice. I should pay attention to the chat, and I'm sorry if I missed some comments. So soak the rice 48 hours if you can. Every 6, 8, 12, 15 hours, get rid of the water, put some new water. And then when you're ready to rock and roll, you put about 6 times as much water. You put plenty of water, and you cook your rice, not like rice, but like pasta. You cook your rice like pasta, bring it to a rolling boil, and you cook it. And now you can do one of 2 things. The best way, which I don't do, is called parboiling. You boil it for 5 minutes, get rid of the water. So now a lot of the arsenic has been removed, and I've seen some statistics. I can't remember what the percentage is. Then you put, go back to your original ratio of water to rice, and you bring it to a boil, cover it, and let it sit for 40, 45 minutes, traditional way. What I do is I just boil it in plenty of water, like pasta, and then I remove the water and I serve it. Does it taste as good as the traditional way of making rice? Not quite, but we've harmed the earth. We need to take measures to protect ourselves from arsenic and the downsides to our nervous system, our brain, with arsenic. So that's one thing about rice I wanted to share. Let's talk about a few other foods. So citrus. I love citrus and I love fruits. In Food for Life, we encourage people to eat legumes, which are beans and lentils. Here's some lentils. And of course, the beans. We encourage people to eat whole grains like barley, wheat, traditional wheat, coarsen wheat. I did a Turkish cooking class a couple of weeks ago, and we used some bulgur. They pronounce it bulgur, and I made a wonderful chili out of that. So grains, plenty of vegetables, and fruits. And the good news, this isn't a Food for Life, but the good news is you can eat amply from all of these places. Don't add the oil, don't add fat, and you can eat as much as you want and not gain weight. In fact, if you're underweight, come up to a good weight, and if you're overweight, come down to an appropriate weight. Fruits are great, and I recommend organic. In Food for Life, we don't say you have to be organic, but for many reasons. I gave a talk a number of years ago at Duke, and I was asked to give a talk on food and nutrition, and I'm happy to do that. I do that many times. But then they said, Dilip, include in your talk a second talk, do a second talk, a short one, about something that's controversial. And so I picked organic. To me, evidence base is important. From an evidence base, there is no research that shows eating organic is better for your health, believe it or not. Now, what I believe is that the science is young, and I think find out that eating organic is going to be good for us. What I do know is eating organic is good for farmers. They don't have to spray these chemicals in their fields and breathe and contact these things. So I try to buy as close to 100% organic as possible. I know everybody has a budget and organic's more expensive, but if more of us buy organic, it will bring the price down as well. And food is where I tend to spend my money. I don't spend money on clothes and new cars and so forth. My first car lasted for, what was it, 22 years or more. So
wow,
now my
Dilip.
Wife and I both drive electric cars.
Nice.
So,
I want to acknowledge that we are running low on time, and that not everybody is as willing to jump in as I am. So I know there might be some burning questions out there. So I wanted to make sure that we allowed just a little time. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
and Emily, can I take 30 seconds to make two more quick
Sure.
comments?
Yes.
So snacks for the food, I love things like this. So there are wonderful snacks. When you're buying snacks, watch for the fat. This particular product has 3 grams of fat. That's what we recommend. No one dish should have more than 3 grams of fat. And it has 12 grams of fiber, and it has the sugar is 3 grams. So
what is that? What?
This is called Sammy's Bakery. They sell this at Weaver Street Market. These wonderful, they taste so sweet, but it's only 3 grams of sugar. I don't have time to talk about that now, but I did want to talk about ice cream, and we don't have time. I was going to cook some make some ice cream for you. I love ice cream, and I have my blender, my Vitamix here. All I do is I put frozen fruit in my blender. I put some milk, my choice of plant milk, and I blend it with no sweetener, and it makes a delicious. That's all you need for 100% whole food, plant-based ice cream with practically 0 fat, almost no sugar, and it's filling, tasty. My family prefers my homemade ice cream to when we go out vegan ice cream. So let me stop there, and I'm happy to take any number of questions as long as you'd like one.
So I'm putting it on gallery, and if anyone would like to sort of ask a question like this, or just unmute yourself.
Elise has a question.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you do batch cooking, like cook a big batch of rice or pasta at the beginning of the week, does it lose nutritional value as the week goes on, or is it better to try to cook fresh every day?
Excellent question. So of course, fresh is best, but batch cooking, especially if you freeze things, is fine. You lose a little bit of the nutrition, but not that much. What you gain not only is time, but you gain flavor. A lot of foods, especially Italian foods, when you marinate with the tomatoes and the herbs, the flavor is enhanced. And so like with everything in life, it's a trade-off. Do you lose a little bit of nutrition? A little bit, but not enough to stop you from doing that. I'm an advocate. I don't do batch cooking because I like to cook fresh every day, but I love that people do. So no problem.
Dilip, we have a question in the chat. It says, how can you eat more plant-based affordably?
Excellent question. So there's this misnomer that I went to such and such a market and things are so expensive. So I bought these Beyond Beef. So processed foods can be very expensive, but your friend is the bulk aisle. So if you're on limited income, one of the Food for Life classes we teach is called Healthy Basics. And we aim it for people who are in homeless shelters, people who are college students who don't have a lot of money. You can eat on a very low income. There's a book called Being Vegan on $1.33 a day or something like that. And it can definitely be done. So if you buy, for example, this bag of lentils was probably about $2.50, $3. This is more than enough for a family of 6, right? So you get this, you get some water. We prefer filtered water, so let's add that to the cost. So, a big bottle of filtered water is 9 cents. And then, you have maybe an onion, which is maybe $1. Vegetables. So you can make a nice lentil stew for 6 or 8 people for about $1.50 or $2, something like that. Or, if you do sorry, not that much, $4 or $5 for a family of 6 for that one dish. So if you are willing to buy fresh produce, there are companies, I can't remember some of the names, which will sell you blemished fruits and vegetables that have spots on them, and they take the price down. They taste just as good, maybe remove the blemished portions. So there's many ways. And one thing, maybe down the road, Emily, we could have a shopping trip. I'd love to maybe do an in-person after the pandemic, and we can do a tour in the stores. I do this with some of my classes. We can go through the store and say, yeah, if you want to be vegan, here's a product, super expensive. You want hot dogs. I have a kid in my class, his brother loves hot dogs. So I said, there are transitional foods. There's vegan hamburgers, hot dogs, there's bologna, there's salami, there's plant-based, and these are expensive. You can buy them. Better choice than the meat hot dog. That processed meats are a type 2 carcinogen. And so get the plant-based, it's expensive. You want a cheap hot dog. So many kids in the kitchen, which are kids cooking every other month. We have a recipe for carrot dogs, and you put your carrot, you boil it, you add some spices, and they taste great. So you can this way on the cheap, and I'd be glad to do another session just on that. I'd be glad to take you guys shopping or share some additional resources. So excellent question. It's a fair question. It's not the diet of the privileged. We're not looking for people who can afford it. This is a diet for everybody. In fact, if you think about it, shouldn't a plant cost less than an animal who's eaten lots of plants? The dairy and meat industry are heavily subsidized by our tax dollars. And there's plenty of, go to our farmers markets, support local as much as you can. There's plenty of good, low cost, high quality foods that you can buy.
So Dilip, I'm afraid we have more questions than we have time. And obviously you've turned the spigot on. We're all ready to go. We're ready to go plant-based. So
I'm here for you. I'm happy to help in any way.
we'll stick around maybe just for a couple more minutes. There's a question about plant-based diet improving allergies. People want to know about that. Tom mentions that Wildly Affordable Organic is a book by our friend Linda Watson. And
Linda's great.
Linda focuses on that eating vegan is cheaper, or can be. There's a link to Imperfect Foods and a mention that Jamie Sheridan says oat groats are great and cheap, and a curiosity about baking and which plant-based milk is the best substitute for baking. So
let me talk about baking. So any of the plant-based milks will work well, including homemade plant milks. But maybe part of the question is, what about eggs? And that came up in my Food for Life class yesterday. There's many substitutes for eggs. Banana works well. Applesauce works well. There's a product called Egg Replacer by a company called Energy. And a box of it will cost you about $7. But unless you're baking all the time, it lasts us about, somebody's asking about oil, it lasts us 5 or 6 years for a box of the Energy Egg Replacer. And we make fluffy pancakes. My daughter likes to bake cookies. So there's lots of, vegan baking is easy. And there are whole websites and blogs just about vegan baking. Question, because this is a great question.
Love it. There's even a reference to the Great British Baking Show had a vegan contestant if you want ideas, and happen to have, I think that's on Netflix. I'm so sorry to have to be the one to cut off questions. You guys, Dilip is an amazing resource, but I'm going to have to turn it back over to Lynn.
Could I quickly say something about oil?
Yes.
Because there was a question about oil. You don't need oil. And the secret for not using oil is to use high quality stainless pans Keep your heat at a medium temperature. You can caramelize onions. You can do all your cooking. You do not need oil.
Ooh, that's a really great tip. And it helps you avoid the nonstick issues that you can have.
Don't buy
Well,
Teflon.
Lynn, let's turn it over to you to close us out. Thank you so much, Dilip.
Oh,
Thank you.
wow. Emily and Dilip, y'all are fantastic. I wish we could be right there in the kitchen with Dilip and eat some Thanksgiving food together, but that'll have to wait for another time. Thank you to both of our speakers. Thanks to all of you who were here with us today. I'm wishing you happy eating for your health and for the health of the planet. And for those of you who can stick around just a few more minutes for a brief video of the prayer chain, I think you'll be glad that you did. So we're going to close out with the prayer chain. There's just a few seconds with no sound, and then there's some music. And so thanks again. Have a great weekend.
Are you seeing that?
The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The task is mighty, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. The task is mighty, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The land is holy, and so are we. The land is holy, and so are we. The land is holy, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The storm is raging, and so are we. The storm is raging, and so are we. The storm is raging, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The sun is shining, and so are we. The sun is shining, and so are we. The sun is shining, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready, and so are we. The world is ready, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. This is where we are called to be. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising, and so are we. This is where we are called to be. 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 The tide is rising.
by living on a dirty planet. Help us not to give in to bitterness, cynicism, and despair, but to stay committed. Help us to remember that we can each do something. Help us to be courageous in demanding of one another, our families, our neighbors, our friends, and especially ourselves and our leaders, that we do whatever is necessary to save our planet. Help us to persist. With our hearts open to your inspiring, sustaining, redeeming, transforming power, we pray.
The Affairs of Washington had a chance to spend 2 weeks helping out with the refugees that were streaming across the border, mainly from among the indigenous communities of Guatemala. They were telling me, "Padre, ni siquiera teníamos la agua para beber. We didn't even have water to drink." Is highlighting the interconnection between the climate emergency and justice for the poor. Also, I'm here to speak to you, just to let you know that I have heard 5 years ago, Pope Francis wrote the breaking encyclical Laudato Si' and Care for Coming Home again. As a voice, speaking to all people of goodwill, calling to bring together the concerns for responding to the cry of the poor, cry of the earth, and also the cry of our democracy.
I'm the Reverend Stephanie Allen from the Church of the Nativity up in North Raleigh, also known as the priest with the purple hair. And I am beyond excited that we are coming together to use our voice. Because do you hear that noise? Do you hear it? It's not the sound of traffic. It wasn't the car alarm. It wasn't the sound of the horns that were honking and affirmation for your work out there. That noise is the hum of the universe that pulls us all together. That hum that is whatever name your faith tradition says was present at the moment of creation. That hum is telling us it is time for a new way of life. It is time to raise our voices and say, yes, individual action absolutely must be done. Spiritual practices, without a doubt. But we must call to account the systems, the powers, and the structures that have brought our climate to this crisis. We must act, pray, and speak out for a new, transformed way of life.
I'm Shireen Yemen, and I'm here representing the Zakat Foundation. And the Zakat Foundation does its work in representing the Islamic faith. So I would like to start by greeting you with the greetings of the greeting of Islam, which is may peace be with you. I'm hoping to share with you my view on the Islamic faith and how it views human beings like us. And by human beings, I mean everybody. And I look around and I see people, and I look in the emails exchanged and the conversations, and everybody's here, not only as a person of faith, but also as a human being. So
The tide is rising, and
For
so
Partners for Environmental Justice. I'm an associate minister at Mouthpiece Baptist Church in Southeast Raleigh, and I am excited to be here. I see that for the Partners for Environmental Justice is an organization that partners at Wetlands Community Center, and our job is to give information about the communities that are connected with Walnut Creek. Is everyone familiar with Walnut Creek?
we are called to be. The land is holy.
This with the purple hair was saying earlier about the hum of the universe. There's one way.
Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Really appreciate those who stayed to the bitter end, and except it wasn't bitter for me. It was really sweet. I wasn't able to be there. I was out of state for several months, so I feel like I was there at the prayer chain, and Emily and Dilip were great.
They
So
really were.
thank you, Elise, for your planning. And everyone, stay in touch. Have a great weekend. Have a great holiday season. And ICCT will see you in the new year. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank-
Bye, Dilip.
thank you,
Bye.
Emily.
Thanks, Dilip. Thanks, Emily. Amen.
Thanks, everybody. It was a pleasure.
It sure
Bye.
was.
Oh,
Thanks
Dilip,
again.
that was wonderful. I want to take your classes.
They're
Please
good.
I'll share some links.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye.